Life's tough
when you're in PC.
Life's rough
When you depend on me.
to give you
weapons,
items,
armor,
information for your journey, and still you still machine and try to hurt me. Life's tough
When you're in PC.
Life's rough.
When you
So it looks like it is time again to dive back into the world of Emily Care Boss, a content creator that I spotlighted once before, and in order for us to really go back to the last time that I spotlighted her, we have to go all the way back to one of my first episodes, which was Under My Skin. The last time that we really talked about Emily Care Boss was whenever we talked about Under My Skin, a game about exploring relationships and sexuality that was both intriguing, interesting, and inventive. Once more, we dive back into the creative mind to look at the role-playing game that is much more in line with board games than it is with more traditional pen and paper RPGs. I know I don't typically talk about board games, by not a lot, at all. But considering the fact this comes from Emily, who is a content creator mainly for RPGs, and the fact that it is kind of a pencil and paper thing, I'm going to let it pass for this time. It's just enough of an RPG for me to cover it on the show. So the subject of today's video is the RPG board game, whatever you want to call it, from Black Green Games called Dread House. I think the best way that I could describe Dread House in as few words as possible is a combination of Betrayal on the House on the Hill, the Jenga game Dread, along with just a pinch of Munchkin for some fun for the whole family flavor. You could definitely see the inspiration in all three accounts. Dread and Betrayal are both very well-received games in their own right. Dread using Jenga set instead of dice in order to calculate moves and whatnot, similar to this game, and also Betrayal for being exploring a house and coming up with some really spooky things. Dread House is much more family-friendly, though. I'd like to think of it as more of like Apples to Apples is to Cards Against Humanity. Betrayal and Dread is to the more child-friendly version, Dread House. The game usually features 3 to 6 players who get the classic dare of spending as much time as possible in a creepy mansion on the hill. The mansion serves as a board game for the players as you adventure from room to room. You have the spooky deck, as well as the monsters mixed in, to play as encounters, as well as an item deck that you can discover if you search these various rooms. You have to make draws in the tower on instances in which you are split up or forced to do so by spooky things happening. If the tower falls on your turn, then your player runs home, which means that you are now in control of the monster since your character is now gone. Definitely sounds familiar, right? It's very much the same concepts of Betrayal and Dread mashed together in a more family-friendly setting, so whenever you're playing with your 8-year-old, you don't have to deal with mummies vivisecting the characters that are in the game. The game is a fun in its own right. It does take some cues, and by that I mean most cues, from other games, but it's certainly much more of a light-hearted romp than others that can take a very serious, heavy tone. It definitely makes for a more jokey, fun experience than the other games, and can be a moment of knowing when to pull out which game depending upon the player's mood and setting. Overall, I had to debate for a little while on where I wanted to include this one. I was thinking it could be a miss because it takes so much from other games to the point where it's almost, I don't want to say the word plagiarizing, but it's definitely taking a lot of cues from different games to the point where I'm starting to wonder where the originality comes in. But overall, I think it's a fun experience, and if Apples to Apples and Cards Against Humanity can exist, I think that Dread House and Betrayal/Dread can also exist in the same world. So I'm going to give it a crit. It's a fun game, and it depends on, like I said, the kind of mood and setting you're looking for. If you want a much more lighthearted and fun experience than Dread or Betrayal offers, I would say pick up Dread House.